Next up, it would be the high school traffic study presentation. And that will be presented by Mr. Heinrich from Heinrich and Klein Associates. Good evening.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Again, my name is Andy Heinrich. I'm a traffic engineer with Heinrich and Klein Associates. I have over 40 years of experience in conducting traffic studies for various types of development. And as an aside, I'm a graduate of North Penn High School, class of 71. So, for what it's worth. We were asked to do a traffic study for the proposed ninth grade addition on the North Penn High School main campus. As part of the scope, the scope of the work, the assumptions for the ninth grade addition was 1,000 students and 125 staff. We looked at technically 3, but really only 2 alternatives to that. The transportation center on the campus. We looked at keeping it somewhere on the keeping the transportation center somewhere on the campus, or relocating it off-site. And the reason I said possibly 3 alternatives, it would either stay where it is today or be on another spot on the main campus. But for traffic purposes, projecting traffic, that was all considered one alternative. And then the second alternative, obviously, was to relocate off-site to another location. Next slide, please. The traffic impact study itself, our scope of work, besides going out to the site and looking around and observing traffic conditions, we focused on 2 time periods of the day, 6:30 a.m. to 9 a.m. on a typical weekday, and 1:30 p.m. to 4 p.m. On a typical weekday. We looked at 5 locations: the intersection of Valley Forge Road and Sumneytown Pike, Valley Forge Road and the high school entrance opposite McAuliffe Lane, Valley Forge Road and Snyder Road and the high school driveway, and Troxel Road and Snyder Road. Based on, go to the next slide, please, I think. Yes, this map gives you the locations, 3 along Valley Forge Road and 2 more along Snyder Road, basically boxing the large block that has the high school campus on it. Next slide, please. As part of our study, we projected to 2 future time frames. This is in keeping with PennDOT and most municipal standards for doing traffic study. You basically project out to the approximate opening year of the development you're evaluating, and then depending on how much traffic the development is likely to generate, and in this case, we exceed those thresholds, you project another 5 years further into the future. So for the purpose of this traffic study, we projected traffic to the year 2029 and to the year 2034. As a result of our traffic studies, the way you determine what improvements might be needed to mitigate the traffic impact of any kind of development is, once you've projected traffic out into the future, you have one set of volumes pre-development and another set of volumes post-development. And what you mitigate for is the difference between pre- and post-development traffic volumes. Without getting into the gory details of traffic engineers using delay and what's called levels of service, if you like, I can go into as much detail as you like, but suffice it to say, going through all that analysis, we basically arrive at a list of recommended improvements to mitigate the traffic impact of what 1,000 students in a separate ninth grade center on the main campus might need in the year 2029 and 2034. At the intersection of Valley Forge Road and Sumneytown Pike, the idea would be that Sumneytown Pike needs to be widened to provide 2 through lanes in each direction, basically a 5-lane cartway with a center left turn lane. Townsend Township has a traffic impact fee ordinance. They've studied their future transportation needs, and they collect traffic impact fees from developments to accomplish that transportation improvement plan, and in this case, the widening of Sumneytown Pike. In round numbers, the traffic impact fee, if applied to the projections for the ninth grade edition, would come to about $330,000. So the recommendation is that the school district just pay their lump sum and hope that the township deals with that problem in a reasonable time frame. I will add a caveat to that. We are dealing with PennDOT and the Montgomery County Department of Roads and Bridges. PennDOT in particular would prefer that money be spent on actual improvements, even if you can build a part of those improvements, and then let the township come up with the rest at a later time. But this is all for future negotiating when it comes time to submitting applications to PennDOT. But I just put it out there for your consideration as things move forward in time. At the intersection of Valley Forge Road and the high school entrance, we're calling for lengthening the left turn lane northbound to turn in to the driveway, the high school driveway, widening the southbound direction for a separate right turn lane, and then widening the driveway itself, lengthening the left turn exit lane to come out of the school, and providing a second inbound lane. Next slide, please. Going up Valley Forge Road at Snyder Road, our recommendation is to install a new traffic signal at that intersection. It, quite frankly, is warranted today, even without the ninth grade edition, but it's one of our recommendations. And then last but not least, and the source of a little bit of indigestion in doing this study, Troxel Road and Snyder Road. There's no clean improvement for this intersection. No matter what we tried, the normal idea is put in a traffic signal. Well, it's not warranted. Always stops, very cheap. It doesn't do the trick, but it's better than just the stop signs on the side street. Ultimately, and what probably would be looked at with great favor by both PennDOT and the township, is to construct a roundabout at the intersection. A major cost and potentially would require right-of-way to implement. By the way, the other improvements, the signal at Snyder and Valley Forge Road, and the improvements at the main driveway on Valley Forge Road, it appears that there's sufficient right-of-way to implement all those improvements, so you wouldn't have to acquire right-of-way. Troxel Road and Snyder Road is the one location where right-of-way needs would have to be addressed if the roundabout was forwarded. The two-lane widening on Sumneytown Pike, it is assumed that Townsend Township, if they implement their improvements with their Act 209 improvements, that they would ultimately take care of that. And then finally, just to say that going back to Troxel and Snyder, the west side of Troxel Road is municipal land. The township building is there. So presumably some of that right-of-way might be relatively easy to acquire if the township doesn't in fact turn it over in its entirety. But the other two corners on the east side of Troxel Road, depending on how the roundabout would be configured in the intersection, might require some right-of-way acquisition to proceed with that kind of improvement. Last slide. So this slide shows where these improvements are situated in the study area. And next slide, please. And then finally, brief discussion on the transportation center. It is moving the transportation center off-site results in a net decrease in traffic at those intersections we have studied. It's not a big decrease, so the recommendations remain as they were for just the ninth grade center, but the study was, the numbers were looked at, and it would be beneficial to the confines of the school district, the confines of the high school campus, to move the transportation center to another location, just because it does represent a slight decrease in traffic volume. But at the end of the day, we're still talking about those same recommended improvements.
Mr. Heinrich, can I thank you for all this? This is great. Quick question: are these in order of priority? Would you say they are all equally priorities?
In traffic impact studies and land development, there is rarely any prioritization. They basically need to be operational when the new building opens.
Okay.
That's the way most municipalities will deal with it, how PennDOT will deal with it. I will say that there is some chance, depending on the magnitude of these improvements, that state grants might be available for doing some of this. It's hard to say at this early stage. Sometimes there's a little leeway given by at least PennDOT. I don't know about the township in this case. There might be some leeway to let improvements slip as long as there was noticeable movement to progress to completion of those improvements.
Got it. And my last question, and this is kind of tongue-in-cheek, but do you have any experience inserting a traffic circle with high school drivers?
You'd be surprised. You'd be surprised.
Okay.
I've been in several situations where we've recommended roundabouts, and the local residents in the vicinity of the roundabout in particular would come out in force, adamantly opposed to it. And then shortly after, if the roundabout did proceed to completion, and there's a couple up in Quakertown, for example, if you want to go look on how these have operated, people love it now, once it is opened. So there is a bit of a learning curve, but the good news is roundabouts are made to slow traffic down. You cannot help it. Mm-hmm. So if there are crashes as part of a learning curve, they're usually very minor, usually no injuries involved, mostly just property damage. So eventually people figure it out. And I will say, PennDOT has a new policy that whenever you're looking at doing an improvement, the first thing you look at is, will a roundabout fit? And then you go from there. In fact, we might have to deal with it for Snyder and Valley Forge Road. However, because there's a series of signals along Valley Forge Road already, I'm pretty confident that another signal coordinated with the existing signals is probably going to be accepted there. Troxel is a little different animal.
Right. Okay. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
When you say coordinated with the other signals, do you mean synced? The lights would get synced?
Interconnected, yes.
Finally?
The fiber optic cable
Okay.
to interconnect.
That would be a
them.
huge improvement right there.
Well, technically, the school and Valley Forge Road, they're interconnected now. I'm not sure when the last time they were maintained. The method of coordination is old technology, and the time clocks tend to drift over time, so they start to go out of sync if they're not properly maintained every couple of years. So that could be the problem. And it's also very difficult to get a really good progression of traffic on two-way traffic flow. Who do you favor?
I was thinking more down like White's Road and Allentown Road and then White's Road.
Well, we're closer to Sumney Town Pike. You already have the signal at the high school driveway, so this would be the next signal going further north. I think that's the way it would go, but it's not an unlikely occurrence that you might get up to Allentown Road and White's Road and do the whole corridor.
Okay.
That would be a design issue to address further down the road.
Okay. And then to clarify on Dr. Bauer's questions, there is no prioritizing of the different options? Because I was looking at the your other report that was attached and the level of service, table 5, and it looks like Valley Forge Road and Sumney Town Pike have the most options of like turning, in and out versus like say Snyder Road and the North Penn High School driveway. So wouldn't we be prioritizing Valley Forge Road and Sumney Town Pike and fixing that first over?
It's like I say, getting back to the realm of dealing with municipalities and PennDOT in the land development process. The idea is that the improvements are supposed to be in place when the development becomes operational. So in that sense, there are cases like a huge shopping center, which we're not seeing too many of them anymore, or a large office complex or employment center, which is built out in stages. You can prioritize traffic as you build out stages. but for the purpose of this traffic study, it's assumed that you're just going to plop the building in and start to fill it up with school students right away. So from a land development perspective, it's likely that the township and PennDOT will want all these improvements in place when the school opens.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions?
I
Mr.
have a-
Fusco? Go
Yeah, I
ahead.
have a question. When you talk about the Snyder Road, Troxel roundabout, and the one side is township property, the other side's private property. So would the construction of that have to impede on people's private property in order to design that?
It's very likely that some right-of-way would be required on the corners, on the two eastern corners of the intersection, the northeast and southeast corners of the intersection. Now, I haven't laid anything out. It's possible that everything could be shifted further onto the township land. We have to get clearance from the township to do so, obviously. So I don't know what they feel about their front yard there. It also makes for a much more difficult design of the roundabout, because one of the ways to slow traffic down, the general rule of thumb is that an approaching motorist always sees a curb in his frontal vision as he approaches the intersection to give him further reason to slow down. As you start to shift off the center line and make it to make it a more diverged or angled approach on one approach, you're going to make it straighter on the opposite approach. And the straighter you make it, the more likely a vehicle can go straight through the intersection, and you're defeating the purpose of slowing traffic down when that happens. So it's very important how the roundabout is centered in the intersection or near the intersection to support the theory of slowing traffic down. Having said that, I am working with the Delaware County Intermediate Unit down in Fallcroft, Delaware County. We're working with an engineer to design a roundabout at an intersection that the school would ultimately feed into. And one corner right-of-way is just not available. So the whole center of the roundabout has been skewed to be as much on the intermediate unit's property as possible. So some of the ideas of how a roundabout works, well, starting to get a little technical, but you put what's called splitter islands in to make traffic diverge off the center line to slow traffic down. So there's a lot of concrete that's going to have to be poured in excess of what a normal roundabout might have. But there are ways perhaps that we can get around the idea if everything gets moved off to one side of the intersection or the other to avoid right-of-way acquisition. But like I said, I haven't laid anything out. It's premature to do so, but there may be ways of addressing that.
When you're approaching a situation like that and you have that private property, how do you handle that with the homeowners? Is that an issue of eminent domain? Is that something where we're purchasing part of the property? If they refuse to purchase it, like what does that look like?
In my example with the Delaware County Intermediate Unit, they chose not to acquire property. Other places, that is a strategy that can be taken. You can only get so imaginative with how a roundabout will lay out until you start to defeat the purpose of how the roundabout is supposed to operate. So, like I said, until we get to that point, I can't give you a hard answer on that, but there may be ways to work around it. There may not be.
Thank you.
I'm just wondering from the administration, has there been any traffic study prior to 10 years history?
I'd have to look to Mr. Schneider and Mr. Scroggs. Not in my 8 years here.
And not that there should have been, but I think it's important for context. And to be quite honest, I think many people in the community, if there was a money tree, these are improvements that would make a difference tomorrow. Maybe not speaking for Troxel and Snyder, but already with the traffic that the community faces getting to and from the high school. So this is very helpful to inform the conversation, and it's also good to know that there can be a way forward, even if there's a couple different moves to make.
The idea of widening Town Pike to 5 lanes has been on the books with Town Mensen for over 20 years, so.
And I do think you hinted at it as well, but this is the importance, not only as we look at the type of renovations for the high school, as traffic is connected with that, we obviously have had the prior study that was presented on enrollment, but it's very important to have our elected state representatives and that delegation involved in every step of this process so that we have a coordinated strategic effort to ensure that we get as much state support as possible in this project. So thank you for pointing that out.
Thank you, Mr. Casa.
Can you give,
Go ahead.
I have one question. A guesstimate about length of time it would take to do one of these, recognizing that you might need to acquire right-of-way, AKA eminent domain, and getting through all the approvals. So I guess, I'm just curious with what else we may be planning, how does this fall in? You're saying it has to be completed by the time our project is completed and we, let's say, receive a building permit or occupancy permit.
Each one of these improvement intersections have different features that make timing a different ballgame at each location. For example, to just put in a traffic signal, that could probably be done in 1.5 to 2 years tops, because you're basically dealing with hardware to put up mast arms and so forth, and procurement and approvals is probably somewhat of a big lead time. But now you come down to the high school driveway, there's an existing signal, that would probably have to upgrade it as part of the physical improvements to the intersection, and then there's road construction. But there doesn't seem to be any right-of-way acquisition required. So that might be another couple of years, so maybe you're talking 3 to 5 years if we start today, maybe sooner, who knows? But then something like the roundabout at Troxel, where right-of-way is an issue, that can always be contentious. You never know. That could take very long. And then the widening of Town Pike, like I said, that's been on the books for 20 years, over 20 years already. So, and I'm not aware that the township is ready to move
On that one.
on that
But
as we speak.
for these, are they projects that could be done in parallel, or because of traffic engineering, how you do work, you would have to do one and then do another, because it would just really, wreak havoc on existing traffic patterns?
There's no relationship of the 4 improvement intersections
Okay.
to one another, except for the one thing. It would be nice to do all the signal work along Valley Forge Road as close to simultaneously as possible, so that the interconnection work can all be done as well. So you might want to delay installing the signal at Snyder and Valley Forge Road until some of the physical work at the driveway to the high school is done. But outside of that, each of the projects could technically proceed on their own. Yep.
Are there any other questions? So, I'm sorry, just to get this clear in my head, this might be kind of a dumb question, but who decides, has the final say in what gets done? Is it the township and what they require of us to build? Is it the zoning?
Well, ultimately, Valley Forge Road and Troxel Road are state highways. Town Pike is a county road. So they would ultimately decide. You have to get permits from them. Snyder Road is a township road, and the signals, when they're done, are owned and maintained by the municipality. So the municipality comes back into whatever PennDOT does as far as those intersections are concerned. So everybody gets their shot at you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah. Looking forward to it. Great.
I'd like to clarify as well as one board director that I feel that any community discussion about eminent domain and the right-of-way is really very low on my priority list until we see what's going forward. It's important to know as a risk, but Personally, I feel that it has to meet a very high threshold for something like eminent domain, and I want to make sure that there aren't reckless people in the community who decide to use this for dis or misinformation. This is part of a larger community conversation, and I want to make sure that it's clear, at least from my one perspective, is one vote on this board, that it would have to be really a choice that's the last one to be made when it comes down to that type of decision dealing with a private property. So.
No question about it. And keep in mind, again, Troxel Road is a state highway, Snyder Road is a township road, and probably a lot of that right-of-way hopefully comes from the township's property. So they're going to have a lot of say in exactly how the roundabout would lay out, and probably be very involved in any right-of-way acquisition that would be ultimately required.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Heinrich.
Thank you. Have a good
Appreciate all your
evening.
work.